What is going on, college basketball fans? And today we got a way too early 2024 March Madness predictions video. So we will take Joe Lunardi's way too early bracketology that he came out with here on May 23rd, and we will take it, put it in our own PDF, and fill it out from the first round all the way to the national championship. Like I said, this is way too early. The bracket in March 2024 is going to look way different than this, but it is fun to take a look at who some of my championship favorites are at this point and which of these teams I think can make a deep run. Now, I did take a look at this bracket before I hit record, and I disagree with a lot of some of these seedings. So I think a lot of teams are overseeded, and that will kind of reflect in some of my upset picks. So I am ready to get it started. Make sure you guys subscribe if you guys are new. If you guys are fans of college basketball, this is definitely the channel for you. So hit that sub button. Only 1,000 away from 5K. Help your boy out and comment down below who is your championship favorite way early at this point in the offseason. So let's get it started. We have our top overall seed, which is the Kansas Jayhawks. Hard to disagree there. They have an absolute squad on their team. They're returning Dejon Harris. They brought in Hunter Dickinson. They're returning guys like KJ Adams, who had a breakout year last year. And Kevin McCullough actually just announced that he is going to return for his fifth year of eligibility. So Kansas is looking very stacked. They also got other transfers like Nick Timberlake. They are a squad. A bench player in Arterio Morris. They will destroy South Dakota State here in the first round for sure. Kansas looking very, very scary. Next up, we have Miami versus Colorado. Now, Colorado is getting a lot of hype. I like the 9 seed for them. I think some people kind of overhyping them a little bit. I think the Eddie Lampkin transfer get was good for Colorado, but it's nothing that crazy. So I think people need to pump the brakes a little bit on Colorado, even though I really do like Tristan Da Silva, who they have returning. They're going to have a pretty decent team. I think they'll be in the tournament. 9 seed, I like that range for them. Miami, coming off of a Final Four appearance, only an 8 seed. I think that they should be a little bit higher, honestly. I know that they are losing guys like Jordan Miller and Isaiah Wong, but they're returning, Nigel Pack, who is going to be a big-time player for them, and also Poplar, who I think is going to have a breakout season for Miami, especially with a guard position opening up there in the starting lineup. So I think Miami, they are going to defeat Colorado here and move on to the round of 32. Next up, we have San Diego State coming off of a championship appearance as a 5 seed in the top left region, which is where they are seated here once again in Joe Lunardi's bracketology. So maybe that's their sweet spot. That's where they want to be. They got to the championship game last year. They are losing some of their players, but I expect them to be really good once again. They do have to go up against a very good Liberty team that I expected Liberty to be really good last season, which they were. I thought that they'd be a tournament team. This year, he has them in. We'll see, but I just can't pick against San Diego State right here. They are too good defensively, very well coached. Aztecs moving on to the next round. Next up, we have 4-seeded Texas A&M. Love this seeding for the Aggies. Put some respect on their name. Wade Taylor is returning for the Aggies, and he is going to be on an absolute mission. I think that Texas A&M is going to be a top team in the SEC along with teams like Arkansas and Kentucky. I have the Aggies moving on right here to the next round. Big fan of the Aggies. I thought that they could make a run last season. They had to play Penn State first round, which is a tough. They got a really tough draw last year. I think this year they're going to be back for some vengeance, and they get past Eastern Kentucky there in the first round. Next up, we got St. Mary's versus Ohio State and Boise State. Not really sure if Ohio State's even going to make the tourney, but 11 seed, I'm fine with it. They have a decent recruiting class coming in. Boise there as well. Out of those two, I don't know. I just don't trust Boise State in the tourney. I'm going to say Ohio State actually wins that game, but then St. Mary's takes it and moves on to the next round. I'm a big fan of Aiden Mahaney for St. Mary's. He was a freshman last year going on a tear. He's only going to improve, And even though they're losing Logan Johnson, St. Mary's is going to be in very good hands with Mahaney. Next up, we got Creighton versus Vermont. A little bit of a different look here for Creighton this season, coming off of an Elite 8 appearance last year, which was the furthest they have ever gotten in program history. Very, very good accomplishment there for head coach Greg McDermott. He's just an excellent coach. And they are losing Ryan Nemhard, lost him over to Gonzaga through the transfer portal. And Arthur Kaluma is also in the transfer portal as well. But they should be returning. Baylor Shireman has announced that he is returning. They are bringing in Stephen Ashworth, the transfer from Utah State, which is an amazing pickup, and you can't ask for a better point guard replacement after losing your star point guard in Ryan Nemhard. And Ryan Cockbrenner should be back, and also Trey Alexander. Both of them have entered the NBA draft with eligibility to return, so we'll find out that very soon. But if both of those players return, Ryan Cockbrenner, one of the best rim protectors in college basketball, returning. Stephen Ashworth, I think Creighton gets past Vermont pretty easy here. Next up, we have my team, West Virginia, going up against Mississippi State. A lot of cool ties here with this matchup. Transfer Jimmy Bell went down to Mississippi State. He would have been the fourth center on West Virginia's roster. Don't really blame him at all there. But also Chris Jans getting back to the tournament in his second season as Mississippi State's head coach. And kind of interesting, he was the head coach for New Mexico State. He was the head coach for New Mexico State, where they did get a tournament win over UConn in the first round, 12-5, where Teddy Allen was the star player, and Teddy Allen formerly did play for West Virginia. So a lot of interesting ties here with this matchup, but I do think WVU wins this. They got really good transfers in Kirk Krisa and also Jesse Edwards and other guys as well, Jose Perez. Like, West Virginia's roster is looking very good and very deep once again. I actually kind of think, as a fan, I feel like they're underseeded as a 7 seed. I would probably have them as a 5 to maybe even up to a 3 seed. I think a 4 seed would be fair for West Virginia. Very underseeded here as a 7, and I have them getting past Mississippi State. Speaking of very interesting ties, Purdue goes up against Iona as a 2-15 seed, and this is 100% intentional by Joe Lunardi because this storyline is just perfect. Purdue versus Tobin Anderson, once again, the former head coach of Farley Dickinson University that upset Purdue as a 16 seed last season, is now the new head coach of the Iona Gales, since Rick Pitino is now the coach of St. John's. So, Tobin Anderson, can he knock off Purdue once again? I think that this is an interesting matchup, and if I'm being honest, I think Purdue would win this matchup, but because it's Tobin Anderson and he just knows how to beat Purdue, I'm going to go with Iona for the memes here a little bit, even though I do think that Purdue would 100% win this matchup if it did happen here, just because I do feel like they're young guards, they have more experience now, they are going to be better this year. They're returning Zach Edey. They have almost the exact same team coming back, and those freshman guards are just going to be even better, and I could see Purdue definitely going on a run pretty deep next season, but I have to do it. They're going up against Tobin Anderson. Come on, it's Tobin Anderson. He's going to win. He's going to beat Purdue. So let's go ahead and finish out this region. First, we have Kansas versus Miami, and as good as I think Miami is going to be once again next season, I think Kansas is going to be too much here for him. I mean, I think Miami gets really disrespected here as an E seed. Like, they should at least be like a 6 or a 5, just because Isaiah Wong, Jordan Miller, very good players, but Miami's going to be really good once again. But Kansas, they just they get a bad draw here. Miami gets a bad draw to have to go up against the stacked Kansas roster in the second round. Kansas moves on to the Sweet 16. Next up, we got San Diego State versus Texas A&M. Very fun matchup here. Wade Taylor going up against San Diego State. It sucks that San Diego State lost their transfer in Kashad Johnson. I think he would be a really good player for the San Diego State team next season. I'm actually going to go with Texas A&M here. I'm going to go with Texas A&M here to move on to the Sweet 16. San Diego State, I definitely could see them going on another deep run, but I really like this Aggies team and the guards they have returning. They've been due for a run the past couple years. Like 2 years ago, they kind of got robbed. They got snubbed from making the tourney. They got a really bad draw last season. Let's move the Aggies on to the Sweet 16. Let's do it. Next up, we got St. Mary's versus Creighton, and this would be fun. And this kind of matchup, it depends for me. Is Creighton going to be returning Trey Alexander and Ryan Cockburner? Personally, I think that they will be back, so I'm going to say Creighton moves on here to the Sweet 16. Next up, we got West Virginia versus Iona and the Fighting Tobin Anderson Gales. And, to be honest, I only picked Iona over Purdue because it would be funny. I'm not going to lie. And I try to make these predictions pretty good. I'm picking West Virginia over Iona here. I think Iona might not even have the squad year one under Tobin Anderson to really even make the NCAA tournament, let alone get an upset over Purdue and make it to the Sweet 16. So I'm already stretching it out like a ton with Iona being in the round of 32 over Purdue. West Virginia would be Iona here 100%. Iona, they had a lot of players transfer out over to St. John's and other places because Rick Pitino left. West Virginia moves on with Kerr Kriisa, Seth Wilson, who I think is going to have a breakout year, Jesse Edwards, who's going to be a beast. You got 2 junior centers that are going to be off the bench, and James Okonkwo, who's an absolute block machine, Mo Wagi. You got Trey Mitchell returning for his 5th year. He is going to be an absolute stud for this team next season. I'm very excited about this West Virginia team as a fan, and I think they have potential to go on a deep run. Next up, we got Kansas versus Texas A&M, and I think the big men play is going to be too much here for Texas A&M. Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, it's going to be too much here for A&M. I have Kansas moving on. Also, Kevin McCullough, who is a really good rebounder for this team as well. They have really good shooting. Deshaun Harris is going to be able to play very good defense on Wade Taylor. I think it's a tough matchup there for the Aggies. Next up, we got West Virginia versus Creighton. Can Creighton make it back-to-back Elite 8s, or can the Huggy Bear make it back to the Elite 8 here this season? And I am going to say that West Virginia moves on to the Elite 8 and defeats Creighton. I think that they have the team that can match up with Creighton very well. Now, I do think that if Baylor Shireman can go on a tear here and shoot the lights out, they could definitely get past West Virginia. I think it's a very 50-50 matchup right here. But I think Jesse Edwards matches up really well with Ryan Cockburner. I think that those two can kind of play each other out right there. Also, Kerr Kriisa, Stephen Ashworth, that would be a very fun matchup in the Elite 8. You got Trey Alexander, you got guys like Seth Wilson, Jose Perez on this West Virginia team. I just think that West Virginia has more depth, which is ultimately what this comes down to. I think West Virginia comes here. And here's the thing about West Virginia. They foul a lot, they get fouled a lot. Creighton does not have the depth to be in foul trouble. So if West Virginia can get Creighton into foul trouble, they will win this game, and their depth can take over. Next up, we got Kansas versus West Virginia. Now, Kansas is a team that is going to have some depth to be able to match West Virginia here, and I do think that Hunter Dickinson is the type of player you want to have on your team against a guy like Jesse Edwards. Jesse Edwards is a guy who plays in the paint. He's a great shot blocker, and he is a really good scorer in the paint. But Hunter Dickinson can kind of stretch out the floor a little bit and knock down the 3-ball, pull him out of the paint. So that is going to be tough there. But West Virginia does have other shot blockers as well. This is probably a matchup that we're going to see, twice in the regular season, maybe even in the Big 12 tournament, possibly a Big 12 championship game, but we see it here in the Elite 8, and I think Kansas gets it done. I think Kansas gets it done here in this matchup and makes it back to the Final Four 2 years after winning the Natty. So let's go over to our bottom left region. We do have Marquette versus the Toothpaste Colgate making it back here into the tournament, and Marquette is going to be another stacked team. I think they 100% deserve a 1 seed here in the preseason. I mean, they're returning all of their stud players. Like, you got Tyler Kolek, reigning Big East Player of the Year. You have Cam Jones, who is an excellent shooter, great player overall at the shooting guard position. You have guys like Iggy, Prosper, Mitchell. Stevie Mitchell is going to take another step up this year and be that sixth man that this Marquette team needs. They are going to go deep in this tournament, and I have them getting past Colgate here. Next up, we have Northwestern versus Clemson, and I'm going to go with Northwestern here pretty easily. I know Clemson has some guys coming in out of the portal, and they might be decent, but I got Northwestern coming in here and picking up the win. They're returning the guy, your favorite player's favorite player, Boo Buie, and Northwestern is going to be on a mission this season. They get past Clemson and make it to the second round. Next season, or next game, we have Kentucky versus Grand Canyon, and here's the thing, Kentucky is kind of have a brand new team coming in, right? Full on a ton of top recruits coming in. Number 1 recruiting class, in my opinion. They are going to be a problem. But I am going to have a big time upset here. My first 12 over a 5. I'm picking Grand Canyon here to move on to the second round and upset Kentucky as a 5 seed in the first round. I think Kentucky's going to have a really young team, and although they are going to be a star-filled team with all their talent, I think Grand Canyon, who was a really good team last year, but a really young team, a lot of sophomores, a lot of juniors on that team, returning a lot, I think Grand Canyon is going to be set up really well to pull off an upset in next season. And with Kentucky losing in the first round here, with a lot of talent, and a lot of their 5-star recruits are going to be heading to the NBA draft next season, that is going to raise a lot of eyebrows on head coach John Calipari, because he is already under a little bit of pressure to kind of make a deep run. So I'm kind of playing into that storyline a little bit. Plus, I really do like Grand Canyon's team next season. Next game, we do have Arizona versus Furman. Can Furman do it again? I'm pretty sure they're losing their backcourt that they had last season, which was the reason they were able to upset Virginia last March Madness. But I'm going to have Arizona here. Although they did lose some players like Azulis Tubelis is heading to the NBA draft. They lost Kirk Kriisa to the transfer portal. They did pick up Jaden Bradley. They picked up Kashad Johnson. So they picked up some really good transfers here as of late through the portal, and I do think Arizona is going to be able to get past Furman here in the next round. Next up, we do have Wisconsin versus Duquesne, and I'm going to pick the Duquesne Dukes here to pull off the upset. Now, I was a big fan of Duquesne last season. They went on a nice little run towards the beginning of the year, and I thought that they might even win the A10. I think that they might be favorites, or one of the top favorites to win the A10 this season and make it back to the tourney. They're returning a lot of their top scorers. I'm going to take the Dukes to get past Wisconsin here in the first round, 11 over a 6. Next up, we got Houston versus McNeese State. I got Houston moving on. Although they are losing Marcus Sasser, Jarris Walker, they're still going to be having Jamal Shed. They picked up LJ Cryer from Baylor out of the transfer portal. They have a lot of young players that are going to be able to step up as well. Houston is still going to be an absolute problem next season. A lot of these young players are going to be able to step up for Houston next season. And they still have the leadership with Jamal Shed, an amazing player, and LJ Cryer who can create his own shot, an amazing three-point shooter. Houston is going to be a problem again next season. I have them moving on here. Next up, we do have Xavier versus Virginia, and I just don't trust Virginia. They're losing a lot. Last year was supposed to be their year where they make a deep run with their veteran team. Were unable to do so, lost in the first round of Furman. Xavier also losing a lot of their players, a lot of their talent from last season, but they have a pretty decent recruiting class, and they brought in some transfers. I trust Xavier here over Virginia, 7/10. Next up, we got Alabama versus Weber State, and I just very much disagree with this Alabama 2 seed, way overseeded in my opinion. Like for how much they're losing, and for what they're bringing in, I just think Alabama way overseeded here. I don't expect them to be a top 3 team in the SEC this next season, and I just think Alabama way overseeded here as a 2 seed, but I do have them getting past Weber State here. Next up, we got Marquette versus Northwestern, and Marquette just with all that talent returning, Tyler Kolek, like I said, they're going to be tough to beat. They're going to be a really tough out, and I'm going to have them move on here. Next up, we got Grand Canyon versus Arizona, and I'm going to ride the Grand Canyon wave here. I need to have some sort of Cinderella, even though it's way too early. It's hard to tell who the Cinderella is going to be. Just for, I have to have somebody. I'm going to have 12-seeded Grand Canyon make it here to the Sweet 16. Next up, we got Duquesne versus Houston, and I'm not going to ride the Duquesne wave because the Houston matchup is going to be way too much for them here. I have the Cougs moving on here to the Sweet 16. Then we got Xavier versus Alabama. I am going to have another upset here because I think Alabama's way overseeded after they're losing Noah Clowney, Brand Miller to the NBA draft, lost Jaden Bradley to the transfer portal, and although they have a decent recruiting class coming in, that's a lot of freshmen as well as just not returning a lot of their players from last season. I just don't trust Alabama here. I think they're way overseeded. I'm going to take Xavier here to move on past the Tide. Then we got Marquette versus Grand Canyon, and I do have Marquette finally ending that little run there by Grand Canyon. I just love the Grand Canyon basketball team. When they are good, their fans show up and that place gets rocking, and I would love to see their fans be able to beat teams, historically great programs like Kentucky and Arizona on route to a Sweet 16 appearance. That would be amazing for their program, and those fans definitely deserve it. Houston versus Xavier here. I think this would be a really fun matchup, but I am going to go with Houston, the 3 seed, to make it here to the Elite 8 to go up against Marquette. Now, this is where it gets interesting. You got Jamal Shed versus Tyler Kolek. You got Cam Jones versus LJ Cryer. The backcourts are going to be a really fun matchup here in this one. Now, the front court. I do feel like Marquette does have the advantage in the front court for sure with Prosper, Iggy, and then they also have Stevie Mitchell. And even though I do think Houston always has decent big men play and very good defensive play, I could see Houston doing it, but I'm going to have Marquette here move on to the Final Four right here. So next up, we do have Duke as our other 1 seed, and Duke definitely deserves that 1 seed. I mean, wow, they are going to be so good next season, returning, in my opinion, their 3 best players from last season, which is Jeremy Roach, Kyle Filipowski, and Tyrese Proctor. I think those were their 3 best players, and for those 3 to return along with their stacked recruiting class coming in, Duke is going to be a very tough out, and they are going to destroy Texas Southern here in the first round. Next up, we do have Indiana versus Iowa State. And Iowa State, a team that I could see being sneakily good. I think they probably get around to 9 seed next season. Indiana, I feel like they're a little bit underseeded here. I feel like they should be at least like a 6 maybe. I have Indiana moving on. I think Khalil Ware there with the Hoosiers is going to take off as the replacement for Trace Jackson Davis, and he is really going to thrive under head coach Mike Woodson. So give me Indiana to move on there. Next up, we got USC versus Charleston. Is Charleston going to be back for a vengeance after losing in the first round after being very good last season, 30-win season, and falling short in the March Madness tournament in the first round? They're going to have to go up against a USC team that has Bronny James, Isaiah Collier, and just a lot of hype behind this Trojans team. And as much as I want to pull the trigger on this upset, I'm just going to say that USC does make it past the first round. I do think they're a little bit overseeded as a 5. I kind of expect them to get, maybe they will get a 5 because I feel like, the bracket might favor them a little bit here, and all of a sudden the Pac-12 is going to get a lot more respect because they have a lot of stars on their team and a lot of people are going to be watching. But next up we do have Arkansas versus Drake, and Arkansas underseeded as a 4 seed. They would destroy Drake, and I'm a big fan of this Drake team. I think that, they could have made a run last year in the March Madness tournament. Bad draw for them here. Arkansas, with all the transfers that they got over the offseason, oh my God, they are going to be a very, very tough out. Next up, we do have Maryland versus Florida. I'm going to pick another little sneaky upset here and pick Florida to actually pull off the 11/6 here over Maryland. And Maryland is going to be a pretty decent team next year, second season under Kevin Willard. But I really like this team that Florida's put together here in the offseason. They had a very underrated transfer portal, bringing in a lot of guys that I like. And look out for the Gators next season. I'm going to pick a little upset there. Next up, we do have Texas versus Long Beach State. I'm going to take Texas here, and Max Asmus, who is transferred to the Longhorns from Oral Roberts. He is now going to be the starting point guard, and they are also returning Tyrese Hunter and Dylan Dessou, who is going to be a stud big man. If Hunter Dickinson did not transfer to Kansas, I would say that Dylan Dessou is probably going to be the best center in the Big 12, but he has to be number 2 because of Hunter Dickinson. But Dylan Dessou, he broke out towards the end of last season, and he is going to be a stud for this Longhorns team. Next game, we have 7-seeded UCLA versus 10-seeded Auburn, and I'm low-key kind of liking how this Auburn team's turning out. I think UCLA lost a lot over the offseason and just lost a lot of their really good players. Jaime Jaquez, Tyler Campbell, finally moving on from UCLA, and also your freshman that was really good last season, Amari Bailey. He's heading to the NBA draft. Losing a lot of talent there at UCLA, and I'm a big fan of Johnny Broome. I think Johnny Broome is going to be a stud in his second season as an Auburn Tiger, and I like them. They also have a really high recruit coming in there for the Tigers as well. I think Bruce Pearl has a chance to make a little bit of a run here next season as a 10 seed in this position. I like Auburn here to move on. Next up, we got UConn versus Wright State, defending national champions as a 2 seed. I have them moving on past Wright State here. Next up, we have Duke versus Indiana. You love to see it in the round of 32. 2 historical programs going at it, and honestly, I just feel like Duke is the better team here. I mean, Kyle Filipowski is going to match up really well with Khalil Ware. That's going to be a fun matchup if we get to see it. And then you also got, I just think that Tyrese Proctor, Jeremy Roach, all these really talented freshmen coming in, it's going to be too much guard play for Indiana, and I got Duke moving on here to the Sweet 16. Next up, we got USC versus Arkansas, and Arkansas. I actually think Arkansas maybe wins this game by a lot. Like, I'm talking 15, 20 points. Like, Arkansas has a stacked team, and I just think Arkansas, they play really good defense there with Eric Musselman. I trust them for sure over USC. Give me Arkansas to move on. That sets up an amazing matchup between Duke and Arkansas, which, if Arkansas wasn't so underseeded as a 4 seed, they should 100% be a 2 seed, especially considering Alabama was a 2 seed in this, and Tennessee. Like, what? I don't know what Joe Lunardi's smoking, but Arkansas should definitely be a 2 seed over those 2 SEC teams. But we do have Florida, another SEC team, going up against Texas, and Texas is too good, man. Texas is too good. I got them moving on right here as the 3 seed. I mean, like I said, that Max Asmus, Tyrese Hunter backcourt is going to be great. And even though Texas is losing Marcus Carr, bringing in A. Smith is just huge. And like I said, Dylan Dessou versus Florida's new center is going to be Matt Hamilton, which I'm a big fan of because he is a former Marshall player. That's going to be a fun center battle as well. But then we got Auburn versus UConn. Speaking of really fun center matchups, we're going to get to see, Sanogo, I still think hasn't decided if he's returning or heading to the draft. I think he's probably going to head to the NBA draft. But either way, you have the big man himself and Donovan Clingan versus Johnny Broome, and that's a lot of size to have to guard for Johnny Broome, but I do think that this Auburn team is going to have what it takes to be able to compete with a UConn team next season. And over the past 5-6 years, including last year, which even though nobody really expected it to happen, Kansas did lose in the second round, and the defending national champion has lost in the second round year after year since like 2018, 2017, I'm pretty sure. So that is crazy, and I'm going to ride with that trend, and I'm going to pick Auburn here to upset UConn and move on to the Sweet 16 as a 10 seed. What a run here by these Tigers. Next up, we do have Duke versus Arkansas, and this is a matchup that could happen in the championship next season. This could be a championship game matchup we're getting in the Sweet 16. We're getting in the Sweet 16 here, and I'm not going to lie. I really like this Duke team, but I really like this Arkansas team. I am going to go with the Razorbacks here to defeat Duke in the Sweet 16. I think I might trust Eric Musselman a little bit more than John Shire there in his second year at Duke. And I'm going to pick the Razorbacks here, and here's why. They're always good defensively. They're always good at playing in those low-scoring games and pulling out the win. But they are going to have a lot of players who are going to be able to shoot the rock this season as well. I mean, they brought in a ton of really good transfers. You got Davenport, who can shoot the rock from the forward position. You got Tremont Mark, who's going to be a really good two-way player. He can shoot the rock. L. Ellis from Louisville. You got Keon Minifield from Washington, who's going to be a really good point guard for this team. You also brought in Khalif Battle, who can shoot the rock lights out from Temple. I mean, so many tough transfers that they brought in on this Arkansas team, and they are just going to be an absolute problem. I have the Razorbacks moving on here to the Elite Eight. Next up, we do have Texas versus Auburn. And this is where the Bruce Pearl run ends here for Auburn. I'm going to have Texas move on. I just think Max Asmus, Tyrese Hunter, Dylan Dessou, that is a big three you have to take that seriously. Rodney Terry, second season as head coach. And even though he hasn't done a great job maintaining those 5-star players Texas had coming in, they still have a stud team coming back here, and I do have Texas moving on here to the Elite Eight. And for the Final Four, we do have a 3 versus 4 seed, and I'm riding with Arkansas here to the Final Four. Eric Musselman finally getting here to the Final Four after many Elite Eight appearances, a Sweet 16 appearance last year as an 8 seed. They get to the Final Four. The Razorbacks are here. So we have Kansas, Marquette, and Arkansas in here so far. And now we have our final region. And we do have Michigan State as a 1 seed. And wow, Michigan State is going to be a stacked team next year. Returning Tyson Walker. It's official. He will be back in the green and white next season. And then we do have A.J. Hoggard, who is going on a tear towards the end of last season. He is back. He is going to be a stud for this Michigan State team next season. Are losing out on Joey Hauser, who is not returning for next season, but you have a stacked recruiting class, a top 3 recruiting class coming in this season on top of these stud players returning. Michigan State, I have them moving on here easily past Morehead State. Then we got TCU versus Oregon, and oh my god, I hate this. I hate seeing TCU as an 8 seed. Very, very underseeded. They are going to get past Oregon here for sure. Very easy 8-9 to pick, in my opinion. I mean, TCU, even though they're losing Mike Miles Jr., they brought in Jameer Nelson Jr. from Delaware, who's going to step into that shooting guard roll beautifully. Still returning Damian Ball. Brought in Avery Anderson in conference from Oklahoma State, who is a beast and could be an amazing six-man for this team. TCU will be really good once again next season, especially in that very fast-paced offense that Jamie Dixon runs. They'll be back at it again next season. Next game we do have North Carolina versus Yale. I am going to have UNC move on here. Returning Armando Bacot, returning RJ Davis, not returning Caleb Love. Unsure where he's going to play yet. I would say my prediction for that is Missouri. We'll talk about that in a future video very soon. But North Carolina moving on here to the next round. Next up, we do have Florida Atlantic versus James Madison. FAU is going to be so tough next season. Coming off of a Final Four appearance, now a 4 seed in this bracket, and they are returning all 5 starters from that Final Four team, so they are going to be absolutely disgusting. They were 1 shot away, if it wasn't for San Diego State hitting that buzzer beater, from a national championship appearance, and just such an accomplished program. You know how much money they got from that Final Four appearance that they can put back into their basketball program, make it better, and they're going to be joining the AAC conference next season as well. So it's amazing for that program. They're on the rise. They're moving on past James Madison here to the round of 32. Next up, we do have Villanova versus either Illinois or Memphis. And I'm not going to lie, Memphis clears Illinois here. Memphis clears Illinois here, in my opinion. But I do think Villanova, either way, would wind up winning this one. Villanova is going to be very tough next season. I mean, they brought in some transfers. Justin Moore is going to be back on that squad, fully healthy. I mean, Villanova is going to be a problem next season. I thought Villanova was going to be good last year. They weren't. They brought in some transfers like Hakeem Hart from Maryland as well. Going to be a very good shooter there for that Nova team. They move on here. Next up, we got Gonzaga versus Kent State. And Gonzaga, man. Even though they're losing Drew Timme, they replaced him with a transfer from Wyoming named Graham Ike, who is going to be a stud for sure. And they got Ryan Nimhard as the point guard now. Oh my gosh, Gonzaga. Gonzaga done it again in the portal. Mark Few is ready for another deep run that does not end in a natty. Next up, we do have Baylor versus Providence, and I'm taking Baylor and the veteran head coach that won a national title in Scott Drew over first-year head coach Kim English, even though I do think Providence still will be pretty decent next season. I'm going to go with Baylor here, even though they are losing their 3 guards. LJ Cryer to the portal. They're losing Keontae George to the draft. They're losing a lot, man, but they'll bring more talent in. They got a good recruiting class coming in. Still got some players that were starting last season, like Jalen Bridges. I still think Baylor's going to be pretty decent next season. I think they'll be enough to get past Providence here. Next up, we do have Tennessee versus Radford. And Tennessee, they're way overseeded as a 2 seed, in my opinion. I mean, yes, they're going to have a good backcourt once again next season. They're going to have a pretty solid team, but they also just found out that their big man is not returning to the team next year because he wants to start his career like he wants to start a job outside of basketball, which is completely understandable. So he's not returning. That's a big loss for this Tennessee team because he was so good defensively down there. But they'll get past Radford. I just think they're way too overseeded as a 2 seed. Next game we do have Michigan State versus TCU, and oh my god, I hate this. Like, I could definitely see TCU honestly competing, but it's going to be too much. Like, Tyson Walker, he did not return for his 5th season just for them to not go far in this tourney, and AJ Hogarth's going to be an absolute beast. Those freshmen are going to be studs, man. Sparty moves on. Then we got North Carolina versus FAU. I'm going with FAU, man, to knock off the Tar Heels and move on to the Sweet 16. They're just, like I said, returning all 5 starters. I think that they can have a good game plan there to slow down Armando Bacot. If they do that, they're going to win. So I got the Owls moving on. Next up, we do have Nova versus Zaga. And this is just an awesome game that we would get to see between 2 amazing programs that are going to have very solid teams next season. And I'm going to go with the slight upset here. I'm going to go with Nova to upset Gonzaga as the 6 over the 3. I like that pick, man. Next up, we got Baylor versus Tennessee, and Baylor lost a lot, man. A lot of that guard talent. Tennessee's good defensively. I got to go with Tennessee here. Even though I feel like Tennessee very overseeded as a 2 seed. They should be way lower, like a 5, honestly. I think they get an amazing draw. They get an amazing draw to get to the Sweet 16. So they get there. Next up, we got Michigan State versus Florida Atlantic. And I'm riding Michigan State, man. They're too good. They're going to be so good next season. I got them moving on here to the Elite Eight. Next up, we got Villanova versus Tennessee. And I'm going with Villanova as the 6th seed, getting to the Elite Eight. I think they're my highest seed that has gotten to the West Virginia has a 7. Also Villanova has a 6, get to the Elite Eight. So I like those picks. I think both of those teams a little bit underseeded there. I mean, Villanova maybe kind of fair as a 6. I'd like to see them maybe up as a 4 or a 5, but very talented team with honestly a very favorable region to get out of, in my opinion. And honestly, Michigan State, they got through their hardest games. Like, I think FAU, playing TCU and FAU in the 2nd and 3rd round, that's brutal, man. They get past that. I think they're getting past Villanova. And I have Michigan State here getting to the Final Four. So our Final Four is now we do have Kansas versus Marquette. And then we do have Arkansas versus Michigan State. And this would be an outstanding Final Four, must-watch games. I mean, the Final Four is always must-watch TV, but let's go over the matchup. So we do have Kansas versus Marquette to start us off here, and it's going to be very fun backwards, right? Tyler Kolek versus Dejon Harris, like 2 of the best passers in college basketball last season, and they will be returning to face each other in the Final Four. Like, amazing. I love the way that this bracket has played out, and that point guard battle would be so much fun to watch. Like, I love watching players that just know the game of basketball, and those 2 players know it very well. They're going to have to slow down Hunter Dickinson. They do have very athletic bigs in Iggy Prosper. Like, they are going to be able to do that, I think. And it's going to be a very fun matchup. Like, I do feel like Kansas might have slightly more depth. I mean, Arterio Moore is coming off the bench, but then you have Stevie Mitchell coming off the bench from Marquette. These 2 teams match up like very well together, and I think the X factor in this one might be Kevin McCullough, which is why I'm going to go with Kansas here to make it to the national championship. Then we do have Arkansas versus Michigan State, and wow. Okay, another fantastic matchup that I would love to see. 1 seed versus a 4 seed, and Tyson Walker going up again. I do feel like Michigan State coming back, returning guys like Tyson Walker, AJ Hoggard, are going to be on a mission. I do think guys like Sissoko, I think you say it actually, is going to they're going to take a big step up this season as a big man, and you have really athletic players on Michigan State. I really like the front court for Michigan State. They also have some really good freshmen coming in. I like MSU, man. I like Michigan State here to take it and make it to the Natty. And this is honestly the championship game that I wanted to see in 2020, the COVID year where it got canceled. I wanted to see Devin Dotson versus Cassius Winston. But we are going to get to see Dejon Harris Jr. versus Tyson Walker, which is going to be amazing. Not as amazing as that other one, but very amazing, and altogether as teams are just going to be very good to go up against each other. Now, this matchup is just quite amazing. Like I said, that point guard battle, you have very athletic guys on both guys. Nick Timberlake, the shooting guard for Kansas, the transfer out of Townsend, is going to be a beast. He can shoot the rock. He can slash to the basket. Super athletic. You got big men on Michigan State. You got the freshman coming in, Xavier Booker, who is just going to be a beast his freshman year for MSU. And you also got Carson Cooper as a big, who is super athletic. Sissoko, who I mentioned earlier. The front court's looking really good for Michigan State. You have A.J. Hogard, who is just an absolute bucket getter, a guy that I think can outplay guys like Kevin McCullar. And I'm going to say Michigan State wins the national championship 2024 in Arizona. That is where the Final Four is being held, and MSU does it. Tom Izzo gets his second natty 24 years later after his first one. He definitely deserves it, and this is going to be one of his best teams that he has had in quite some time. I'm very excited to watch this Michigan State team. I do think that Xavier Booker as a freshman is going to be one of the best freshmen in the country. I think Final Four most outstanding player, it's got to be Tyson Walker, man. It's got to be Tyson Walker. Returning for his 5th year helps MSU get the natty, and I love the way that this played out. Let me know who your favorite to win the natty is and who you think would win based on how Joe Lunardi has this bracket here. And yeah, guys, make sure you guys subscribe if you guys are new, and thank you so much for watching.